Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Solo Queue. I'm your host, Michael Damiani. This week, I'm joined by guest Matt Simmons from Yo Video Games. How's it going?
Going all right, thank you.
Good, good, good. Sorry, I was getting Simmons' thoughts on Astrobot there. You know, the game that everyone is playing right now. One of the many games everyone is playing right now. Definitely not Concord. Okay, that's my only Concord joke. I had to get it in there. But yeah, obviously fantastic game. I was watching you play it a little bit. Because I reviewed it, I wanted to see everyone else play it. So I was checking out some of your reactions to some of the stuff I knew I wanted to see. I specifically wanted to see like two things from Kyle Bossman's stream, and I got to check those out. I was like, all right, I like these reactions. So no spoilers. Yeah, that's all. We were just talking about before because
It
we're
was
actually
wonderful.
yeah. We're here to talk about Zelda, but before we begin, Simmons, can you just let our audience know a little bit about yourself again? Just a little bit of an introduction.
Yeah, sure. So I'm part of Maximilian Dew's stream where we started, gosh, over 10 years ago. The infamy really grew from my portrayal of Doctor Doom on the Assist Me series, but somewhere around going on 11 years ago, I actually took over the Yo Video Games channel on YouTube. And initially, it was just sort of like the archival of the streams, and then it became my own streams. And then I started doing my own streams, where initially I was in a completely different career, and then like I said, okay, full time into this because the big reason is that it's with Max, it's a big fighting game channel, but I'm much more of a platformer RPG guy. So I came in and what I do is I cover like sort of like the platformer and RPG aspects for Yo Video Games as a whole. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, and I see, as you see with my name, like LinkedIn, Twitch TV ad, Assist Me Doom, stuff like that. So I generally kind of focus on those kind of things. But as you know, was huge devotee to Zelda,
Mm-hmm.
for the longest time. So yeah, like basically, yeah, like RPG platformer guy, Yo Video Games on YouTube, Assist Me Doom on Twitch. Um, but yeah, super long time Zelda diehard, I guess you could say.
Oh yeah, for sure. A lot of Zelda history there. I will say,
Yeah, should we bring up the influence I once had on the franchise, which
oh,
even made it into the Iwata Asks book?
go ahead.
Okay, so do you remember this? This was the roundtable in 2010, E3
Jeez.
2010, and
Yeah, so before
I-
Skyward Sword, yeah.
yes, and we were at the roundtable and they did all their presentation, and Kit Ellis gave me the mic for the roundtable, which I knew he instantly regretted, because I mean, you were there. I mean, I tried to ask it as sort of like, politely as possible. I was like, seeing what was done with Galaxy One and now Galaxy Two, and sort of like Metroid Prime, or not, sorry, Metroid Other M, where we're seeing like a really, a lot of, stuff going into the presentation. Do you think it's Zelda's turn to get like maybe a full orchestration for its soundtrack? And Miyamoto was like, we done it now for Mario and this. I guess it's time we should do it for Zelda too. So I think we will do that for that. And apparently Enuma was completely oblivious to this. And I guess he had told IGN the next day. He's like, I freaked out. And I asked him in the elevator. I said, "Are you serious about what you said to that guy?" And he was like, "Well, I said it publicly now to the media, so I guess we have to do it." And then in Iwata Asks later, they talked about how much that caused a panic back in Kyoto because they didn't have any resources to do orchestration recording, and they had to like call up, at the time EAD Tokyo because they did the Mario Galaxy stuff, and they basically it caused all kinds of money and problems for the Zelda team because Miyamoto had now said they were going to commit to this, so because I asked the question at E3, so that was probably my weirdest, strangest contribution to the Zelda
See,
franchise.
y'all can thank Simmons for orchestrated music making it into the Zelda games by causing that panic. No, that's so I want to say one thing about that in general. It's kind of surprising when a lot of us like consumers, players, fans, whatever you wanted to, call the group that plays these games, where we all want something and we think the devs know that we want it, but they actually aren't fully aware that there's a large group of people who want that, or that anyone's even really asking for it. So it's kind of shocking because you feel like they'd have their finger on the pulse for their own franchise for some of this stuff. So that's like an example there. But also with it recalled me a time when I was at E3 as well, at a preview appointment for Final Fantasy 13, and where I asked Kitase and Toriyama about, hey, can we get like English and Japanese audio options for this game? And they like everyone, the team just looked at each other like, people want that, and like, what? I was like, wait, what? I was like taken aback. I was like, wait. We've never thought of this? And they asked the group, because it was a group interview, do you think people want this? Every single journalist there was like, yes. And I was like, oh my God.
Wow, I forgot about that. I was like, wow, like, wait, you guys want like dual audio? And like, it's so standard nowadays.
Yeah. So that's like, yeah, they definitely... there've definitely been instances of that as well, and like even more recently, definitely been like events and things like that where the dev team or the directors or creators just aren't fully aware. And like it's nice when they're transparent like that, when they'll ask, for example, like I think it was like at the Dawn Trail Media Tour at Naoki Yoshida, where there was like this was the coolest thing. I wish Nintendo would do more like stuff like this. They'll never do stuff like this. Where I mean, the round table is probably like the last time they did stuff like this, where all the journalists there for the preview event, they just held like a group's QA session with the group, and so someone got to ask the question, but he would ask the audience, like who are all journalists, like, hey, so what do you think about this? Like, is it So it's kind of like a dialogue actually. And I'll bring that up because Simmons, I feel like this is one of the shortcomings we see a lot with Nintendo. While they try and be transparent in certain ways, like in the past, like Ask Iwata or these like behind the scenes dev interviews, we don't really get that type of access where fans get to, or even like a group of journalists get to go and just talk with the developers and have that level of transparency. It's usually very guarded, very exclusive. Nintendo is still is probably the most exclusive, maybe outside of like Rockstar or GTA, the most exclusive developer publisher when it comes to access to their stuff. It's like insane.
You gotta also respect the hustle though, because now like the people with money have taken it directly to them, where they're like, well, how can I get in touch with Nintendo directly? Like, well, what if you had like $40,000 in shares of the company? And they're like, okay, and they'll do it, and they'll they'll buy $40,000 of shares just so they could directly ask Miyamoto, hey, where's F-Zero?
Well, I mean, yeah, if you're willing to pay up and go through all that effort, sure, you can ask your question, and they'll have to legally answer it. But yeah, it's kind of a bummer that that's what you have to resort to, those extreme measures, I guess, right?
Yeah, so I mean, good on those people, because I would probably, if I had that kind of money, I would probably definitely do the same thing. Invest a ton of it, and then just like, all right, I want to ask like my honest questions. Which apparently, yeah, I from what I understand, they're a little blindsided by that, and not super thrilled. But I think it also kind of speaks to the volumes too, a little bit of like, hey. We'd kind of like a little like would it would be bad a little yes or no. Like F-Zero is a very pointed question of like, when are you gonna make me a new game? But like what we're talking about here with Zelda is a little bit more on the hey man, we just kind of have like a sort of series lore question here. I'm not asking you for like, can you release the next game in 6 months, please? I'd really like that.
Yeah. Like we've each, I feel like we've been to a few like of these types of events, like roundtables, or had opportunities like where we've like rare opportunities. Like I think the closest I ever got was I had two opportunities, and it wasn't even like the dream opportunity, but like they were opportunities, and you got to take your swings where you can take them. One was with Bill Trinan at Comic-Con, where I just because he had a history with the localization, asking about like some Zelda Timeline stuff, and all it was pretty much what you would expect. It wasn't anything revealing. It was a lot of like PR answers. And he was like, I think he like knew that I knew. It's like, yeah, you're not really gonna get anything out of this. And then when I got to at E3, I got to interview Tezca for
Yeah, I
a
remember that.
non-Zelda game, and just asked them like, did you guys ever have like an idea? Like, was the Zelda Timeline a thing from the beginning? Were you even thinking about like the Zelda lore in the NES days? And they're like, no,
Mhm.
we weren't. And it's like, there you go, because there were some people out there who still believe from day one they conceived, some kind of grand storyline for Zelda. And honestly, like someone maybe in their head had something, but it seemed like they didn't put
Mhm.
forth anything official. Like you've always referenced, like, why don't they make like a lore Bible or something like that? They just like really have never done that. And so, real quick, I'm going to put this on screen for our viewers. Sorry, listeners. This is a graphic that came up from the recent Nintendo Live in Sydney. This is the latest image they had on display for the so-called Zelda Timeline, which is, I think, this is our third iteration now. We had Hyrule Historia. We had an update a few years later in one of the other Zelda books. And now this, although a lot of people are claiming this is not official either, they're saying like this is just like something that team threw up. So it wasn't like officially sanctioned by Japan or anything like that. But honestly, it's not really showing anything new here. We have like, everything in here has pretty much been what we've expected. Like you
I
have the
mean,
three timeline split, and then they just like have the newest two Zeldas, Breath of the Wild, Tears of Kingdom, just off on their own, which is like they're just not ready to put them somewhere. And like I think that's what maybe people who still care a lot about the Zelda timeline, I think that's what they get worked up about, is trying to figure out where they could work and why Nintendo just won't give them anything. Like I think the last official thing was like they're so far in the future or whatever that they're just past everything or something
mhm.
like that. And
And
yeah.
the interesting thing too, I thought, was sort of like the little in between stuff, where they talk about, the Great Fall or this, or they have these non gaming little, then this kind of era or event happened, era of decline and all stuff. And the thing I will say is that, like, I feel there's a sort of in between where maybe Enuma or Fujibayashi didn't sign off on this. Maybe they didn't really make it themselves, but like Nintendo, someone at Nintendo definitely okayed this.
Yeah,
You would not be able to make this, print this, display this without having gone through some channels. So in some sense, this was definitely there was some sort of approval for this
yeah,
in some
and I think
capacity.
that's where the confusion comes from for people who are really in tune with the Zelda lore, the Zelda timeline. Though the content creators are still out there who still focus on that. I think the issue is really establishing, kind of like authorship, like who has authority to say what is and what isn't canon and what counts. Now, I mean,
Yeah.
this is even sort of a problem when it comes to like the biggest things I care about. Like even with like Marvel, MCU, or Disney with Star Wars, it's like sometimes they reclassify stuff and that like infuriates fans because like they're like always like it keeps them on
Yeah.
their toes. So even with like media properties where that's the front and center is the story, how everything connects. Like it is about the payoff from watching
Mhm.
and participating in all this. So Zelda, it's like it's very clear, and they've made this public almost in every instance of a Zelda game's development history. The story comes a little bit later. It's not always been the case, but for the majority of
Mhm.
them, that is generally how they design their games. Not just Zelda, but almost all of their games, with a few, like obvious exceptions. Like I would say, like I know you're gonna bring them up. Like Monolith Soft is probably one of the ones that like does a better job of managing lore. But like,
Man,
but at the same time,
yeah. If you're a Blade fan, you got that payoff in Future Redeemed, and it's just kind of like, I can just see where other Zelda fans or other franchises, just pick a franchise, except
mhm.
maybe Trails. I can see where everyone's like, God, I want that. God, I want that, like that one day to have that crazy payoff. Where it was like
Oh,
there was this goal in mind, this plan in mind.
exactly, Simmons. So like that's the thing. I'll be blunt. It might happen someday, but up until this point, if you're looking back, I mean everything hindsight's 2020. There was never going to be that moment in any of the existing Zelda games. We were never going to get this Zelda games like we're going to like tie all these games together and like you get this like they've never really designed those games that way. And I would
I
even
think
go ahead.
I would say there's two instances that came kind of close
Yeah,
through
close,
because
but not full.
so yeah, because since we're old hats here, I guess the first was kind of playing through Ocarina of Time and realizing you were playing through the events described in the instruction manual of Link to the Past. Um, like, oh, yeah, this is a Link to the Past prequel. Not just saying that because, like, I know they kind of already advertised it as such, but then you sort of realizing as you're releasing these sages, like, oh, the sage is in the intro for that game. So there's a little bit of that there, and I think Wind
Yeah,
Waker was like that as
that's
well,
me.
where
Wind Waker
when
was
you
the
got
closest for me. Yeah.
yeah, when you got to the bottom of Hyrule and the old castle and everything's frozen in time, and you're like, oh, this is directly following up stuff. Like they were teasing it sort of beforehand. There's things that had similar names, Deku Tree, Jaboon, and but then it's like you get to, oh no, we actually are in this. We are acknowledging that everything in Ocarina of Time happened, kind of thing, not just sort of like vaguely referencing or things have
The
sort of similar names or
the
whatever.
yeah, the stained glass, the stained glasses around the Master Sword was like, for me, it was
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
the biggest payoff moment. I was like, you're showing me actual images of things from Ocarina of Time, not just names, not the things that like have evolved. Like these are the sages from Ocarina of Time, and I was
Yeah.
like, thank you for finally doing something like this. It's a name of a town or a village, or it's not like some event described. It's like real and tangible right now, and that was like really nice. And like they've obviously continued on things in sequels. Like technically, like, not technically, Majora's Mask is a follow up to Ocarina of Time. You have Spirit
Yeah.
Tracks and Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, which continue the Wind Waker. It's kind of like the Wind Waker trilogy, although it like one is like completely different environment, and then the
Yeah.
other one has a generational skip. So it's like you're not really getting like what we see like in other properties, where it's like the same group of characters developing over multiple games, and there's like a big payoff, like MCU style, like the Avengers assemble moment. Like we don't really get that
Right.
because Zelda likes to skip around. And this
Yeah.
is like why I kind of like I just decided to like give up on all this, and like I just don't have a general interest, as strong of an interest in this anymore. Is when Breath of the Wild, we're leading into Tears of the Kingdom, and in playing Tears of the Kingdom, it's like they just don't care. They're too they. It's not that it's not like they don't care because they're mean. It's that they don't want to alienate anyone, and they made their choice, and it's clear that with the current Zelda team, they care about maximizing the amount of people who are able to play these games versus like the smallest thing about alienating. And it came down to like even within those two games, which are set in the same Hyrule, set very close together with the same cast of characters, literal characters in the game, not even acknowledging events that happen, not even like the big events, like the big events of the game, just like things you did with them before. They act like you're like, hi, I've never met you before. I'm like, what the fuck? Like we did all this shit before. Like why are you
Yeah.
doing this? Like what? Yeah.
There's such weirdness in Tears of the Kingdom with that, where like some characters are like definitely like following up with you, and then some are like, "Hi, who are you?" And I'm
Yeah,
like,
like inconsistency. I was like, this, you know what? Like, I have my answer. I have my answer, and this is what it's gonna be, and it's fine. Like, if you want to play Zelda for everything else besides like in a self-contained story, this is what the best you're gonna get. If you're really looking for some kind of like strong payoff by paying attention to multiple games, that I just don't think that's gonna ever. I think Wind Waker was the closest ever came, and I think there's a reason for that too, with the staff who are like working on it and up to that point, and what the
yeah,
changes that have happened since to the team since the Wind Waker as well.
yeah, and I think that's kind of the most right there is kind of the most important thing, and I think to this goes kind of for media in general, like across everything. And this is the most important thing to remember is that when you're talking about franchises that go on for a long time, like Zelda or anything else for that matter, authorship is kind of important because you got to pay attention to who's writing it. And that's the thing. Video gaming is such a weird industry because it feels like, even to this day, it does still truly feel like game companies kind of try to hide who's making their games. Like Nintendo doesn't even want you to know anything about the developers until you get to the credits. Like there's like a frustrating new thing with them where they're like, "Who's making Mario and Luigi Brothership? You'll find out when you beat the game." Okay, thanks. Like so the people making it can't even like hype their own game, jackasses. So getting to the point though is that if you want to sit there and really think about, did they ever care about the timeline? Was there ever a timeline? Kind of yes. When you had someone who was not in charge, but someone who was doing most of the writing duties. So it's like, okay, this person, and let's just jump the gun here. It's Koizumi is writing. He does narrative stuff for the games, and he does narrative stuff for the games from Link to the Past to his last role as assistant director on Wind Waker. And there's actually kind of a follow through. Now, Wind Waker is where the timeline technically splits. And you could just say the game was meant to just be a sort of what if one off. And that's fine. But like, okay, so his first role, he's a film student graduate, so he came from film school. His first role at Nintendo was to write the backstory in Link to the Past. Now, granted, they took liberties with the English translation for the version we got, but even if you do a direct translation of the Link to the Past instruction manual, he still wrote in a bunch of backstory lore to Link to the Past. And what we've heard from Tezuka and Miyamoto was that they weren't thinking about anything. They didn't really care. Like, it was kind of whatever. You come up with a reason for this. Like, it was literally just Link to the Past instruction manual backstory was, hey, here's this new recruit. He's a film guy. Write us something. Come up with something. And that's where he came up with the entire original backstory to the Zelda franchise, the three goddesses, the Triforce, the reason for it, the sacred realm, all that stuff. And then he gets more hands-on with Link's Awakening. He's given huge creative freedom. He had this sort of very rough outline by Tanabe done, and then he's like, I want a big egg in the middle of an island, and he's like, okay, and then writes the whole rest of the game. He writes all the characters, he writes all the dream scenario, he writes all this, creates Marin. So he's full in on this, and then when he's given creative freedom, he actually moves. Even though he started that sort of creation of Hyrule mythos, he literally moves right away from it, right away with Link's Awakening. And then Ocarina of Time, he famously talked to, I think, Chris Kohler, and he was talking about how he would hide lore bits in Ocarina of Time away from Miyamoto, because Miyamoto hates text. He hates, Miyamoto, he just hates stories and video games.
Dude, the side quest.
Yeah, so he would hide it in side quests and all this other stuff. So the thing is, and he did write the Link to the Past instruction manual, he did write the original creation mythos. And so it actually, Ocarina of Time, Link to the Past, they do kind of flow kind of nicely. It feels like there is, like, they are keeping track to some extent of, like, hey, we said this happened in the past, and then we said there were these seven sages. Here are these seven sages. We see Ganondorf was sealed in the Sacred Realm. The ending of this game is sealing. It's not killing Ganondorf. It's not making Ganondorf disappear. It's sealing him in the Sacred Realm specifically, because that's what Koizumi wrote in Link to the Past. And then it follows through with Ocarina of Time. And then he writes Majora's Mask. He co-directs the game. He writes all the questline stories and stuff like that. Again, when he's given creative freedom, he seems to just move as far away from Hyrule and everything as possible, which is interesting. I won't really get into it too much, but I really felt like he had set up such a really cool scenario with Ocarina of Time, because that's the game that really introduced the Gorons and the Gerudo like properly, and we got like a more in-depth look at the Zora and the Kokiri introduced, and I felt there were really, really good, interesting things to explore there that they never did.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
we got like actual world building in Ocarina of Time for like the first time. I mean, well, I would say Link's Awakening, we got world building, but like Ocarina of Time decided to do world and mythos building to an extent in game, not just through manuals and side materials, but actually within the game, and having that constantly evolving story. Now, yes, A Link to the Past story beats technically happen in game. Link's Awakening, they definitely do as well. But I think Ocarina was like the first one which really kind of like hit those notes correctly, which we kind of expect from a storytelling game. But as you said, a lot of this was thrown in there, by Koizumi and kind of like spearheaded by them. But they did eventually like move on. Thank you for, I think we had a raid. I didn't see who raid. Oh, Minmax, thanks for the raid. Thank you so much. We had Koizumi move on, and the series and the games he took over, I want to point out as well, the follow up on your point, is that he was continuing like embedding narrative, and even in those games, look at Galaxy. Like Galaxy has a very nice story to it, and it's told over the course of the game. It's not told through flashbacks. It's not it's not. I mean, there's the storybook part, but like it's not as convoluted as some of the ideas they've done in more recent Zelda games, and even like Odyssey. Like Odyssey had I mean, you might not like the story, but like it's there. I mean, it's told throughout the game, and it's like a Mario game. It's like they're putting like pretty straightforward story into like a Mario game. And Zelda obviously has story, but like Koizumi seems to know how to like really balance that gameplay and narrative and have like a rich narrative element if you want, and not going too far with it where it overwhelms the game. So like Mario games are
Yeah.
never dominated by narrative, but you have a context for what you're doing, and I think he's a very good at that. And I think that's why we kind of wonder sometimes, like, would he ever be able to come back and do a Zelda game? What would that have been like, or what would that even be like
Yeah.
if he was able to come back and do a new one? Because before I throw it back to you, Simmons, this is why I get so like disenfranchised, not disenfranchised, just disillusioned with the Zelda timeline at this point, to a point where I just don't really care anymore, is
Yeah.
because I thought Breath of the Wild was the perfect point to break clean. Like, let's be honest. They were everything we'd have said before. Like, it was a bit of a mess, and like it was to be expected. It was like the early days of a lot of new technology and new types of games being made, and then they did start to continue some threads here and there. But like, let's just be honest. Like, the whole thing was a convoluted mess, and they really were never going to tie it in a way that was going to satisfy almost everyone. So like,
Yeah.
start fresh. Breath of the Wild, like,
I
start new lore, and it seems like while they had the opportunity to do that, they're still not doing that. They don't want to do that, and we're just going to get these loose connections going forward.
I really wish they would have just said Breath of the Wild's a reboot. It's not connected.
Yeah, I would
Like,
too.
it's and I think there was even someone who said a Nintendo rep on hand at the Sydney tour even said that they're reboots. Like, because they were trying to say, like, well, Nintendo, like, I got it. Like, someone's like, I got a Nintendo rep literally saying it was a reboot. And actually, that's the thing that excited me the most about this timeline that popped up that you showed was like, oh, are they committing to the fact that it's a reboot? Because it has to be a reboot. Like, you can try to thread the narrative like as much as possible with everything prior to Breath of the Wild. Skyward Sword really mucks it up, and I know even Nintendo has sort of started to state. I think Miyamoto himself was saying like, well, it's like or Numa, maybe it was a Numa, was like, oh, it's like Legends, things are like only sort of half real, or there's like half truths to them. So that's why things maybe don't fit perfectly or whatever. And I'm like, and to me, it's. I think the truth is again, it's because you had different people writing.
Yes, we've definitely talked about this in the past on something before. You and I have definitely talked about how like this is a product of like not having consistent writing team and consistent like lore Bible and stuff like that. Also,
Yeah.
your thing about like a half truths and legends in chat, Sarah Knight pointed out pointing out like how Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest like treat each entry like separate. Like, I would have been fine with that if the Zelda is like, hey, we're not going to try and connect everything. Each game is its own thing, but like they keep teasing us. Like you were saying, Skyward Sword, they kept marketing and advertising thing like a pivotal landmark game that sets up the timeline and the Hyrule and the prequel to Ocarina of Time. Like, this is a big deal. The origin of the Master Sword, and like in game, you really only get like, here's Master Sword and here's Demise, who will become Ganon someday.
Yeah,
and it's
I
it was very loose, to put it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is like personal bias is like I really don't like Skyward Sword's story or writing like at all. But like, I really dislike it more when you try to say it's a prequel because stuff is just so nonsensical in that game. To what came before it, and it was, and gosh, I remember that E3 because it was at multiple E3s. Actually, it was at like 2 or 3. Technically, it was at 3 because it was in a round table.
Yeah,
with
the art image.
Yeah, which I was falling asleep, but then I woke up real quick at that round table, and then yeah, they had a big blowout E3, and then they had another E3 where it was just there as a sort of follow up because it still hadn't come out yet. But yeah, like the story was just. They kept talking about at E3 like this is the beginning. You see the origins of everything that was set up, which to me was also weird. 'Cause I'm like, because Ocarina was that, or Ocarina was supposed to be that origin game. Now we're doing an origin of an origin game, and then we're starting to hear like, oh, now Minish Cap is actually before Ocarina as well, and I'm like,
yeah.
how? What?
I mean,
So
I'll give them points for creativity and trying to do something that no one was really thinking of at the time. Because, like, I'm sure someone there was, like, at least reading some of the ideas being put out there. And I don't think almost anyone put more games before Ocarina of Time. So kudos for trying something, kind of insane like that. But obviously, what we were being presented in the games didn't always add up to what they were, like, saying in the end, I think,
Yeah, I don't know. So I really feel, I truly feel that the timeline went off the rails when it was kind of like the the shift over to, I guess I would call it the Fujibayashi era. The Enuma. So to me, it's like you have the Tezuka era. If you want to talk about timelines, here's my timeline. There's the Tezuka era, and the Tezuka era goes pretty much up to Ocarina of Time. And Majora Mask is kind of like the little in between there. And Majora's Mask is sort of the start of the Enuma era. And the Enuma era is a sort of wandering in the desert era because while Koizumi never directed any of these games like Tezuka and Enuma did, like Koizumi was the narrative glue of the franchise from Link to the Past to Wind Waker. And then, the Enuma era continues all the way until about Skyward Sword. And then it's the Fujibayashi era. Now the Fujibayashi era is where we're kind of in right now. And if you even go back to where he started, with the Oracle games, he was already kind of doing things that didn't really have any follow through or have any sort of like, it just was weird loose narrative connections because they're like, oh, it's about Kumi and Kotake and Twin Rover trying to resurrect Ganon, and you're going to go to these distant, these other non-Hyrule lands, and then all of it's a plot to resurrect Ganon. So that's kind of like, oh, that's weird. It's I don't know how that fits, but sure, whatever. And then again, like Phantom Hourglass is like, it's technically a sequel to Wind Waker. We don't really follow up with much of what happens in Wind Waker, but it's technically
like the opening. Yeah, it's like the opening slideshow.
Yeah,
like explains.
Exactly, and he's only an assistant on that game anyway, assistant director. But anyways, like once he does Skyward Sword, it's like, all right, I'm taking authorship in a way. And I think it was Nintendo Power. I think Nintendo Power used to do developer interviews, or maybe it was Iwata Asks. It was one of the two. And Fujibayashi talked about how, they were making the game, and they're like, so what are we doing for story? And he didn't know, so he took a day off from work. So he took a personal day off, and he said he went home and he wrote the entire script for Skyward Sword on his day off. He came back into work the next day, gave it to Enuma, and said, "Oh wow, he did it cool." And Enuma just sort of signed off on it right away. And to me, I'm like, yeah, boy, does it feel like it was a script written in a day, personally. But I think Fujibayashi's never been particularly concerned at all with Zelda connectivity or timeline stuff. To me, I think he's more of a vibes, not a strict lore kind of director. And the reason why I say he's sort of a vibes director is that here's the thing that I think a lot of people probably would argue with me and probably don't remember, but you probably remember during the sort of Tezuka and Koizumi Enuma era, Link and Zelda were not really treated as a couple. They were not really treated as a romantic interest, really. Not really. You really start to see, like, there's Zelda 2's ending, but I mean, it's
that was a product of NES era stuff. Like so many games had an ending where they're like, dude just kisses or hugs or gets the girl kind of or something. Yeah.
But yeah, like Link to the Past, it's like there's not really anything. I mean, you save her from the prison cell, and like you take her to the cathedral, and you just leave her there. So you just say, but like, there's nothing like super like romantically inclined between Link and Zelda during the Koizumi era, and I think he wasn't really interested in that dynamic. I think he probably just thought it was too predictable or whatever. And you really start to see, like, oh, Zelda really likes Link's got a crush in Oracle of Ages and Seasons, the beginning of Fujibayashi's stuff. And then when he gets into full director's chair mode with Skyward Sword, Zelda's got a huge old crush on Link at that game. And then it's even sort of continued into his Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom stuff. So it's kind of like this little, like, kind of like microcosm of how, like, I think he goes off of sort of vibes and feels where it's like, I remember playing Zelda growing up, and I had this, this vibe in my head about how Link was this courageous knight who, he did everything for Zelda, everything, to save her and whatever. So kind of my stories are kind of like based on like sort of the emotional beats, from how he remembers playing Zelda probably in his youth. And so that's where I think that is my personal interpretation of like why are things set up the way they are in I call it the Fujibayashi era of Zelda games. So I'm like, I think he just kind of goes off of sort of just vibes and feels rather than here's my series lore Bible. which felt like more of a Koizumi thing, where he was trying to like, okay, this is how this happened, and Hyrule was created this way, and then this happened, and then this happens after that, and then da 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 da, where it was more like more pointed at what was happening and why it was happening.
Yeah. I I also remember I was about to look it up, but I don't want it to be too distracted. The quote, the interview where either Fujibayashi or Anuma said initially with like I think it was like with Four Swords, they were leaning toward just making its own like separate continuity thing that wasn't even going to try and tie into the rest of the Zelda games. And then like they decided against that, and like, but I think it was also to illustrate a point that like they were always kind of like the timeline was like always evolving and changing,
Yeah,
with new entries. So I think it was like an indication that like maybe Fujibayashi was leaning on like he had these ideas he wanted to execute and do them and wasn't necessarily thinking about how they would fit together. And then other people on the team were trying to do that for him. And maybe, but like that's the thing that I don't think they want. I think all this is the truth is they never wanted to paint themselves into a corner. So they wanted to make sure that they had a way to make a Zelda game that they wanted to. And it's like, oops, we said this in the previous game. We can't do this now. It's like, no, no, no. Like we're never going to worry about that. So the timeline I think was also a convenient out for them because they, especially what they came up with in the end, it's like, oh, we now have a way to just always make, oh, it doesn't fit into the current timeline. We just make a branch somewhere and like there you go, like that's our solution. And obviously it's a byproduct of contemporary like media like MCU and other like multiverse shit. Like this is the thing, there's no more stakes for a lot of that stuff and it became popular. So I think that's kind of like spread into
yeah,
other writers minds that if you don't have a way out, just make another timeline or make another reality. And like, oh, they'll love this because then it's like the what ifs and like, but the thing is keeping track of all that, that's a whole other can of worms. And
yeah.
it's frustrating. But the what if part here, like we're talking a lot about like Fujibayashi, but like Koizumi moving on. And I know you've thought about this a little bit, but like, no, the what if like Koizumi had stayed and been like, chosen to succeed, as the creator, director, producer of the Zelda series. Would you honestly expect it to have been more connected, or do you think like maybe this is just was inevitable with Zelda series?
Honestly, I think it would be okay. I would think if the roles were switched, if Anuma got sent off to do 3D Mario's and Koizumi was given charge of Zelda instead, and we're looking at the Koizumi era instead of the Anuma era, I think they'd be more connected and more different in a sense where there there would be the connections would be more tighter. They would be more consistent. Um, but I think if Koizumi was creatively in control of Zelda post Wind Waker, I think we would gotten very few games focused on Hyrule and Ganondorf and the Triforce because he did it every chance he could. I think we would have gotten Zelda games that either didn't take place in Hyrule or had nothing to do with the Triforce or Ganondorf at all. Because I think that was, and maybe if Koizumi had full creative control, maybe he would have done something more interesting with it. I always felt like there was a really intriguing political narrative Koizumi had set up in Ocarina of Time that Nintendo would probably never go with. Maybe if Koizumi had full creative control there, maybe they would have done it. And just to sort of like get into like the nerdy lore of Zelda, where we talked about the unification war in Ocarina of Time. Again, this is Koizumi era writing, right? And they talk very briefly in Ocarina about how the King of Hyrule unified all the different races of Hyrule, except one. And that was the Gerudo, who were kind of like exiled to the wasteland. And I felt like there was a really good political setup narrative here, about like two nations vying for control of peaceful Hyrule, or like as Wind Waker, Koizumi's last game talks about with the whole Ganondorf. When I looked at the green fields of Hyrule, the winds brought something other than death. So I'm like, I think a Koizumi era would have been way more story interesting. But I also think Koizumi, he would have gone full tilt into the political ramifications of what he was sort of setting up with Hyrule and Ocarina of Time, which I feel Nintendo would never want to do because that's way too political or whatever. They're okay with other companies like Intelligent Systems or Monolith Soft doing stuff like that, but they themselves, but I also think that the other maybe more likely way they would have gone. I think Koizumi probably just would have just moved away from Hyrule entirely. He probably would have done a thing where every game took place in a different land. It was a different area of the world. More of like of Ys. Like I don't know if people are familiar with Ys. It's spelled YS. With Adel Christensen. He just ends up in another area of the corner of the globe and ends up solving some major crisis over there. The Termina or the Koholint Island kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think a Koizumi era Zelda would have been more connected, more physically, like more or not more technically narratively connected, yes, but it also would have been they would have not tried to do what they have been doing. And I think what's going on now is Zelda and Tears of the Kingdom was like the real big one, the real big sort of confirmation for me is that Fujibayashi is going at this with a Miyamoto like mentality, which is I came up with a reason for my franchise once. I don't need to come up with another reason. I'll just keep remaking that story. To pivot a bit, like with Star Fox, Miyamoto has basically told the original SNES Star Fox story every time. The plot of Star Fox Super NES is the same plot as Star Fox 64. It's the same plot as Star Fox Zero. I think Miyamoto is like, I gave you a reason, Andros, whatever. Who cares? We don't need to like have sequels and storylines that move forward with Star Fox. And Mario doesn't ever need to be anything more than a sort of modern day interpretation of Popeye, where Mario's Popeye, Peach is olive oil, Bowser is Bluto, and there's a whole reason for that, which goes into the whole creation of the original Donkey Kong, which was supposed to be a Popeye game initially. And I think this is just Miyamoto's MO. Like, and I think it's sort of, I think this mentality is probably being shared with the dev teams internally at Nintendo, where it's like, don't worry about, how is this a sequel? How does the sequel narratively follow up the previous game? Just who cares? Just make it something. Because when I got to Tears of the Kingdom, when we were seeing literal cutscenes that are just reenactments of moments from Ocarina of Time, I was like, okay, here we go. First of all, this really should be a reboot. We really should call it what it is, a reboot. And secondly, I'm like, we're doing the Miyamoto thing. We wrote a backstory once. We'll just keep redoing that backstory every single time we make a new game and not really care about how does this make sense as a sequel or a follow-up. Oh yeah, whatever. No, Zelda's a story about Link saves Zelda from Badman Ganon. You don't need you don't need more reason than that.
Yeah. Right, for
so
sure. I want to touch upon the stuff you're saying about Koizumi real quick, as well. Like the notion of traveling to other lands, like I feel like that would have been like a perfect fit for the Zelda series, because some of the best entries have nothing to do with like Hyrule technically as well. So it also provides you like that endless opportunity to not have to be connected to a previous game. We're invested in Link, the protagonist. So as long as it's the same Link or a Link we recognize, we just go into these new worlds each time, and it just gives the writers and the team so much freedom, creative freedom. And that's the other thing, creative freedom, not just for writing. I want to get it, but Koizumi and what we've seen in his tenure as the head of the Mario team, the innovation from a gameplay perspective, because for so long, the Zelda team had been we're living in the shadow of Ocarina of Time and trying to find a way to find a new type of, either make a game that exceeded Ocarina of Time or find a new type of game that just broke free from that. And it felt like as much as they were trying to innovate in each new Zelda game, it was a lot more of the same. And that's why you kept hearing people clamoring, I'm tired of the Zelda formula. Can you do something that's different? Like you were seeing people asking, this feels too similar, while your other games and other series seem to be taking risk and doing new things. If Koizumi had been in charge, like maybe we would have seen that 1-2 of, yes, we get very rich Zelda narratives in each new entry, but also really creative, new, innovative gameplay in each one that like what could have like pushed the envelope a little bit more.
Yeah, because because when you really think about it with Majora's Mask in particular, right? The gameplay is like, okay, we're gonna do Groundhog's Day. You're gonna have this repeating 3-day cycle thing, and how does that? Because that affects, because Ocarina is basically like it's a long checklist of things to do. You go to a spot, you solve a crisis, you move on to the next spot, right? And Majora's Mask has like this very, nobody was sitting there thinking about what if like you had a 3-day span and everything resets when you go back to those 3 days. So it's like you can affect the scheduling, like the sequence of events in a 3-day period. That was not something you thought about when playing Ocarina of Time. And when they do that in Majora's Mask, and that's kind of like, I think, the sort of crazy gameplay ideals. Because I mean, I like Twilight Princess, but like its gameplay innovation is you turn into a wolf. Okay, but
Yeah, we'd already
Ocarina.
seen transformations before in Majora's
Yeah, I'm
Mask.
like, yeah, pretty much. I'm like, it's Ocarina of Time with a wolf mechanic, you know. And then Skyward Sword was so super linear, but it's like its innovation is it used the Wii remote, which was honestly hit or miss, for the motion controls in that game. So, like I feel like there's more interesting thing, and I honestly, I think Breath of the Wild was the answer to that. I think Breath of the Wild was them breaking out, was them getting out of Ocarina of Time shadow, because now it's definitely overshadowed Ocarina. I mean, Twilight Princess sold more than Ocarina, but either way, like, point is Breath of the Wild was their moment of we've broken free of Ocarina. We have our new game on a pedestal here. Uh, for for most people, for better, for most people, I sort of lament some of the things that Zelda used to have that are not in Breath of the Wild still to this day. And I really feel, I was really kind of hoping that Tears was going to be take the template of Breath of the Wild and then put all the Zelda isms back, but it didn't. It was kind of just a bigger Breath of the Wild with a different gimmick. Personally, because like I really miss the dungeon aspect, like really big environmentally based dungeons. I missed acquiring new items, throughout the course of the game that would change what you could do, what you could access, and getting that later in the game rather than right at the beginning, where you get everything you need in the first 3 hours, and then the rest of the game is just the world's most polished goat simulator from that point on. But like, yeah, like the sort of, it's funny because how you talk about how like some people were tired of the Zelda formula, and then Breath was like, Breath of the Wild was that breakaway moment. And now I'm at the point where I'm just going, I miss some things from Zelda. I miss having a soundtrack. I miss having dungeons and environmental dungeons. I miss having a plot that felt more than just an hour of a boardroom meetings put together. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, there's a lot to say about like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom shortcomings, and I think Breath of the Wild, first one, obviously, I think some people like excused some of those shortcomings because of like the task of making something that broke away from old Zelda. It's like, all right,
yeah,
that's first and foremost, and then Tears of the Kingdom's effort was like, okay, you're set in the same Hyrule. Yes, we made a sky, we made an underground, so we did make more, but than what you had seen before. But at the same time, the narrative storytelling, well, I think there was a little bit more there than what was in Breath of the Wild. At the same time, it still mostly relied on the same. It was a slight evolution of what we'd seen in Breath of the Wild. Here are these memories, and they are the crux of this big, narrative, arc that we have here about what really happened in the past with Ganon and what's really going on with Zelda and the Zonai, and it's like, oh, and the sages, like, oh, okay, but like the lack of like real time stakes at points,
yeah,
it's like we don't have that. And honestly, I keep saying that like Tears of the Kingdom like cemented it. Like I'm almost like I'll be honest, like it might sound like I'm just like kicking the can down the road a little bit, but it's like the next one really is the last like straw for me. It's like, all right, I like Breath of the Wild was like the prototype. Tears of the Kingdom was refining, and he had these other crazy ideas he couldn't do in Breath of the Wild, and now you've done them all. You've done all these crazy fusions, building, all this stuff. Here it is. This is your template for new Zelda going forward. You've refined it. This is it. This next one needs to not only be in a new place, even if it's gonna be Hyrule, it needs to be a brand new freaking Hyrule, but you really should go somewhere else. You need to have like it better not be collecting 12 memories or some shit again. Like, like if it's that again, I'm like, okay, I know what I'm getting, and I'm done here. But this is not the end of it. Like, I do lament that Breath of the Wild couldn't have like been that fresh break. Also, narratively, hey, it even like honored the past. It's like they're just legends. It's so far in the future that's like, yeah, no one really knows exactly what happened. So like, they all happened. Even if they contradict each other, no, that's what like that's his legend. That's the legend of that game. That's what it's. And
Yeah.
there could have been like a library there that had like those stories. It's like, yeah, these are the tomes we've collected, but like they're so long ago, we don't even know if they really happened. That would have been beautiful. It's like that's amazing. And like we had all the name. That's why all the regions are named after this stuff. It's like, but it's like we just don't know how it really happened. And like going forward, this is like it could even been like the librarian or historian could have been like, I am keeping better track, so we don't have this problem going forward. Like they could have made it like an in-game joke and everything, and like they're not really doing that. But beyond this, Simmons, to ask about this, yes, we have the new 3D Zeldas and what they're doing now, but we have like a wrinkle coming up this month with Echoes of Wisdom. It's like, we have a new Zelda game that's like kind of a half, like in between of like, it is old, like looks like classic Zelda top down, but also like it's embracing some of the creativity and freedom seen in the newer Zeldas. But also, like, thank God that last trailer confirmed dungeons. Like, oh my God, if you didn't have dungeons this game, I was gonna be like, what are you doing? So we got dungeons, we got a sword. You use a limited time, you can use a sword. So like, here you go. It's kind of like old classic Zelda, but with some new thing or new things. But like narratively, it's like, oh, like, will this? What are they gonna do with this? So it's like, at some point, like they might have to revisit that as well. So I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts on like, do you think Echoes is gonna be like trying to fit into the previous like timelines, or do you think it's like also gonna be nah?
I think Echoes is gonna follow the same formula that Minish Cap and Oracle games did, which were Capcom games, if you remember at the time. This is a Grezzo game. I think it's Grezzo. I don't even know if that's actually confirmed. I'm just assuming it's Grezzo because it looks exactly like Link's Awakening. And I'm like, this is a Grezzo game, and I think they have absolutely no idea, and almost don't care because it's. I mean, you see, like Zelda's in her crystal, cocoon from Ocarina, but Link is fighting clearly Link to the past version of Ganon, and then yeah, I to me, I'm like, I don't think they have any idea. I don't know. It'll be interesting. It would be really funny is if we play through Echoes of Wisdom and there is like a library, like you said, like you find something and that straight up says where it's supposed to be, which would be funny. I think the most easy place to put Echoes of Wisdom would be in the child timeline after Four Swords Adventure. If you want to reference back to that timeline or whatever, but I'm like, that's probably the easiest because that's the most unexplored timeline at this point. Is the child timeline, which is Majora, Twilight, Four Swords Adventure. Because like you have a sort of like the Wind Waker timeline has like a generational skip already. I mean, Four Swords Adventure is a generational skip, but like there's a very much who knows what happens in the future at the end of Four Swords Adventure. And I remember that was probably my most upset was where they placed Four Swords Adventure. I was like, what? I'm like I almost was like, why were you even trying to canonize Four Swords Adventure? You should have just like said, it's not canon, it's a spinoff, it's Hyrule Warriors, it doesn't count. I was almost like annoyed that they just threw it there because I was like, I felt like the ending of Twilight Princess was like, hey, kind of like future's open now. We could kind of go anywhere, do anything after Twilight Princess. You could have a really clean break from like all the stuff like the way Wind Waker was trying to do as well, where it's a clean break from Hyrule, Ganon, and the Triforce. But I digress. Anyways, to me, I'm like, if I were to guess where Echoes is, it's probably there, or it's probably in the adult timeline, maybe or maybe the Fallen Era. No, it's probably closer to the Fallen Hero timeline. Sorry, it's probably in the Fallen Hero timeline. Probably it's probably like between or after Link Between Worlds. Probably, so at the top there, it's probably somewhere around Link Between Worlds or some.
Yeah, it feels like it may be, if it was going to be there, it'd be fit like Link Between Worlds and what Triforce Heroes and those types of
Is that canon? Was that on
It's
the
in that
timeline
thing.
too?
It's right
Oh,
there.
oh my god,
It's
that is the one
look
Zelda
at
game
that.
I
Legend
didn't
of
play.
Zelda Triforce Heroes right
Oh, it
after Link Between
is. It's
Worlds.
right after Two Link Between Worlds, and that's probably, yeah. Like, I know. I think you should move that straight into era of decline. That's absolutely the era of decline of Zelda games. I played it at E3, and I was like, no.
I mean, they could honestly, it could be after Zelda 2. It honestly could be like, hey, someone managed to resurrect Ganon finally, and like you go in there once again, defeat him, but like he had like a spell he learned, or one of his minions learned
Mhm.
that like curse the land or whatever to you know and
Well,
starts from there.
again,
Who knows
like
what it's gonna be? Yeah.
from that first trailer, it feels like Echoes of Wisdom is doing exactly what Tears of the Kingdom did. Here's our Zelda plot line from Zelda 1. You might as well have I don't know if he's still alive, but you might as well have gotten the voice actor back from the Zelda cartoon to voice Pig Ganon. Yeah, get them, yeah, like this. They should have just got him back for Echoes of Wisdom. Because like the start of that game is literally just supposed to be all right. So it's Monday. It's Monday morning. Ganon has captured Zelda. Link's gone to save her. They're having a big fight. Zelda's trapped in a crystal, and then the big twist this time is like Link frees Zelda before he gets
I
sucked into a dimensional rift, and I'm like, okay. So it's like,
Simmons.
so do these guys just like what is like? See you next time Saturday, Ganon.
I
Yeah,
would
yeah,
love
next time
if the
Saturday.
I would love if the evil jar became canon. That's just where canon goes at the end of each game. So each game we're like waiting to see his like one liner in the like evil jar at the end. He goes right there, God, hell no, ah!" It's like I'll be like, that's amazing. Like I would live for that. Like that's the only continuity I need.
If they brought the evil jar back from the Zelda cartoon and Echoes of Wisdom, 10 out of 10 game.
I mean,
but anyways, yeah, like Echoes of Wisdom is just such a weird game. It almost feels I don't even know how it got made. I don't know if it got made because of Anuma's awful remarks in 2016, and they're like, oh, maybe people want a Zelda based game, and they're like, so how do we do a Zelda based game? She
yeah.
moves furniture. We're not we're not gonna have her like be an archer that she traditionally is shown as, or give her her rapier, from Twilight Princess. She's gonna have the magic. It's not quite, but man, it feels so close to the vibe scepter from Super Princess Peach.
I mean,
The DS game, for those who may
exactly.
not be aware.
They also like literally could have. I mean, they just made Princess Peach Showtime, where Peach has different roles she can step into. So like a magic scepter that controls other thing. Like Peach is still like directly doing the combat in that game with the different
Yeah.
outfits. And I was like thinking in my mind, like, why didn't you just do this for Echoes? Like she becomes like a pirate, like Tetra. She becomes like Sheikah, Sheik like a Sheikah. It's like you could have had her transform in all these badass forms that she's had over the series, and that changes the gameplay. It's like, nah, we're gonna go for moving beds.
This is not Koizumi era. And then the thing too, where it's like, oh well, that's the design. The design is the puzzle element, and it's got this very sort of like side game. I don't know. There's something I'm gonna play the game, obviously, of course. Why wouldn't I? But like, there's a very sort of like, yeah, well, we're gonna kind of like, this is kind of like a side puzzle thing. Zelda kind of just moves items around with her magic wand. She's not gonna be involved in direct combat. Like the whole
Yeah.
idea, like she's not involved in direct combat. I'm like, why? Just give her a sword. Like, I mean,
And then now it's like limited. Like when you get that sword, it's like it only has so much meter, and then you got to go back to this area to recharge it. I'm like, that's gonna be real fun. I was like, oh, so you found a way to take the worst part about the Master Sword in the Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom, where it loses its power. I'm gonna sit around for like 10 minutes or whatever.
I sure do love having meter on my sword usage. In a Zelda game, that's all. That feels great every time.
I feel like I'm happy they're having Zelda as the protagonist. I'm just worried that they're treating this like as much as it doesn't on the surface. Maybe it doesn't look like it because there's Ganon, there's Link. It's like it's a side game. Like it's gonna be like a Triforce Heroes or something like that where we're experimenting with new stuff and we want to see people's reaction to it. Like they literally couldn't just make a old school traditional Zelda game and just have Zelda, be playable in it. It's like I mean, you
Because
just let people choose. Like, how hard is it to like flip roles? Like, oh, if you pick Link, then Zelda's the one who's connect. If you pick Zelda, Link's the one. Like, is that really that difficult? And it satisfies Anuma's answer of what's Link doing if Zelda
yeah,
is like, it's
yeah,
like, come on, bud.
his kind of asinine responses is his either one of them were, because he had two and they were both terrible.
Hmm.
But it's the weirdest, because like the weirdest thing to me is that my biggest fear is that someday someone, like, say the follow up to Tears of the Kingdom, the next big open world Zelda gets shown, announced, whatever, right? You know, in 10 years or whatever it's going to take him at this point. Um, and it's just Link again, and people are like, "Hey, was Zelda gonna be playable? Is she gonna be like, oh well, you know, we have a game where Zelda's playable. It's called Echoes of Wisdom. You should try it out." And I feel like my fear is that in the future they're just going to defer to Echoes of Wisdom as like,
Oh,
well, that's
it's
the
like
game
we
where
did
you
it.
play.
We did what
That's
you
the
asked
game where you.
for. Yeah, we don't need to do it again. I mean, to be
Yeah.
fair, if they don't know this, again, remember at the beginning of this episode we talked about like how devs weren't aware of things that the fan base has definitely been aware of, and they're just ignorant to it. I'll call it controversy. This controversy will not end until Zelda's playable in a brand new 3D Legend of Zelda
Well,
game. It will
what
never die until like whatever the next Tears of the Kingdom 6 sequel is. If Zelda's not playable in that, they're gonna hear more, like
Yeah,
complaints.
here's the thing where I will absolutely call out the modern day Zelda team, and I would say they are full of shit. Was if you've seen the modding community for Breath of the Wild on Simu emulator, not the Yuzu, Simu, which is still around and still
Yeah.
still good. They made what they did in that game, just the community itself, like a ragtag group of people, for free on their own time. They made Zelda playable. They changed every single costume piece in that game. And I even did a run where I did a Linkle run, like Linkle from Hyrule Warriors, where I play. They went so far as to they got the voice files from Hyrule Warriors
Oh, nice.
and replaced it for all of Link's grunts and sounds, right?
That's pretty
And
good.
then when they found they were still missing certain voice samples, they looked up the voice actress for Linkle, went to other games and anime she had done voiceover work for, and then pulled
Oh.
those lines to fill in any gaps they needed. And then they made every single piece of armor a completely different, unique looking visual design for Linkle. They changed the entirety of how Gerudo Town works. They changed the dialogue in the game, to properly, they call him, she, her. They made it so that there is no more it breaks a little bit, but like you can walk around in anything in Gerudo Town, and they will refer to Linkle, as a girl, whatever. They changed the dialogue. They did all this. They did all of this in a year. They did this within a year on their free time and their spare free time. So to sit there and think that the Zelda team, whose job is to make these games wholesale, that they somehow couldn't find the time or way to make Zelda a playable protagonist, to me is completely hollow.
Yeah.
It does not take that much, because they already put Zelda in freaking yoga pants. It's not like she's running around in a dress and we have to worry about dress physics or whatever, which, by the way, the modders also dabbled in that as well. But like they already have Zelda running around in yoga pants, so it's not like there's some crazy new crazy new clipping issue you're going to run into or whatever. So like I don't buy any excuse for them going forward to the future. Like, well, Zelda has her role. She has to go back in time and then sacrifice herself, and you have to save her, from her dragon form, or she went to heroically stand up to Malice Ganondorf, and she got put into a fart cocoon, and you have to save her at the end of Breath of the Wild. It's like I don't buy your excuses, because again, as we've sort of established over this whole podcast, they really don't pay that much attention to the hows or the whys. It's come up with a gameplay hook and then fit the narrative around that.
Yeah.
So
I
really can't buy any excuse going forward from them about like, well, it would be difficult to have, Zelda as a playable
I
protagonist. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
please.
I do feel like this is a bit of the problem with their development methodology because they are so closed off from user feedback in the way that a lot of other franchises are at this point. Like look at some of like the most like storied ones that used to be kind of like Nintendo-esque in their methods. Like I'm not like Square Enix. Like I'll just give them like obviously they're not perfect and they have their faults still, but they started listening to like fans. You know, they don't listen to everything, but obviously they start
Yeah.
taking some of that. They have that dialogue at least with their community at certain points, and that really doesn't feel like it exists with Nintendo. And if there are opportunities, it feels like it's just going to like lower level like people who are like it's never going to reach the actual development team. Like, oh, we have a Nintendo Live, and it's like, yeah, you're not really getting to talk with the developers. It's like you're just
Right. Yeah.
there as part of like, it's another part of their marketing machine to promote their games and get you to buy their games and buy into the be a loyalist for their products. And honestly, I think this is that byproduct is that they don't they've honed it to such a perfect to near perfection for how they develop their games, especially the Zelda games. But I think that's a missing ingredient, and I think they are at some point going to like maybe suffer for that for not like embracing a little bit of that element. And yeah,
Yeah.
and then honestly, with Zelda, like yes, we've talked about so many different ways she can be playable, but like even if they were like, we just want her to be unique, it's like comes down to like we don't feel comfortable literally just making her copy pasta of Link in Link's
Mhm.
gameplay. We want to have her, but like it's like okay, then we literally just pointed out you can make her play like Sheik, you make her play like Tetra, like she can use magic. Like okay, she's using magic in this
Yeah.
game, but like why can't it be direct magical combat? Like why can't she cast
Mhm.
spells? We've seen her in Smash Brothers. Like just use her Smash
Yeah. Yeah.
Brothers
Yeah.
combats. Like what the
Yeah.
hell are you guys? You guys are like to me, it feels like someone's not talking to you like Sakurai, go slap the Zelda team, be like, yo, here you go. Just use this template for Zelda in combat. Like, what are you doing? Like, are the departments just not talking to each other? Or is there just something
Yeah.
else going on there that's like, I mean, I feel like it is partly definitely a communications issue, but also like maybe there's something else going on there too that we just don't know about. But it's like there are so many different like
I.
opportunities to have direct
Yeah.
combat and retain like a different style of gameplay, like puzzle based gameplay, but still with combat. It's like, I don't know. Like, it
Well,
just I'm
it's I
flabbergasted. That's
think
all.
yeah, I think they just don't think about it personally. My feeling is they don't think about it at all. But I also think there's a sort of, to be frank with Nintendo, there's a weird shit or get off the pot mentality with me, because here's the thing. Why is he called Link? Because he is meant to be the link between the player and the character on screen. Why doesn't Link talk? Oh, because he's you, because he is you. I mean, whatever, right? And it's like, this is such a stupid idea now, because you don't even get to name Link anymore. Now he is a named character that they refer to him directly as Link in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom.
So
You have no actual connection to him. So to me, I'm like, why don't you just make him a character? Like, I don't like, this is getting into a whole nother debate, I guess, but like the whole silent protagonist thing, like,
oh,
why is he even a silent
done.
protagonist anymore?
Yeah, that's so
He,
awkward and out of
he
place.
he's a named character now,
This is
and
their
he has
yeah.
specific roles
And
now. He
people
has a
react.
specific
It's like,
characterization.
dude, this is where they're if they truly are. It's like they're just so set in their ways. It's like this is where so like you need like this is so obviously weird. Please just look at it from like listen to other people's thoughts on this and be like, we get it. This is what you want to do, but it does not work anymore. You need to make them speak. It's time to rip off that
Yeah,
band-aid and do
yeah.
this.
The time to rip it off was in Breath of the
I
Wild.
mean, yeah, it's
When they took
past.
away the ability to even name the character, I was like, well, we're done here. He is no longer an
Yeah,
avatar.
exactly.
He's not an avatar. He's a character.
It's that you
Quit
yes.
pretending he's an avatar. He's a
Exactly.
character at this point.
And yeah, I just find it funny that character you saying like his reasons for naming Link, and also like was in Hyrule Story they said like he's name also named Link because he's bringing people together. He's the link between people,
please.
and it's like you know what? Yeah, like you preach that, but like you're not listening to your own fans and stuff. Like you're like I'm not feeling really linked to you guys, your development team at all here. So it's like maybe like practice what you preach with your character. It's like bring us all together, like listen to us and like link us together, but not
Yeah,
really
I
so
think
much.
I
Huh?
think it's weird. I think the thing is, if they want to go into a more story cinematic driven direction, and you're not going to be able to name the character, he's going to be called Link, like voiced by name. I think might as well just have him talk. Like there's no real point anymore. Like he's you can still have. I mean, bro, come on, how many RPGs have main characters that talk in tons of dialogue tree options. Like, please. so,
Yeah.
so yeah, like to me, I'm like, if they do want to go into a more story heavy direction, I would say like, well, you might as well just treat him like he is. He's an actual character there. And honestly, regarding, I guess in summary, like for timeline stuff, if they do want to do a timeline going forward, someone should just go in and write a series Bible that's going to cover them for the next 20 years. Well, it's not hard to do. Tears of the Kingdom took 6 years to make. That's 4 Zelda games, maybe. Go in and write a series Bible going forward, and just be like, here's some just general outline of major events. You can maybe throw a game around. Do as you will. Yes.
Yeah. I I
Just
I,
I feel like that's
I would
maybe
love
what
to
they
see
should
that.
do, because
Yeah.
here's the reality. I think the reality of the situation is people do like timeline stuff. They do like feeling there's cohesion to it, and people frankly like being rewarded for following a game. Like, the point is, the whole point of making these games is to get people to become fans of them so that they buy the next game, right? Like, I mean, granted, like, that's kind of the point of every video game, right? So I think when you have a game that is, sort of light RPG mechanic game, and you have narrative elements, I think people like feeling like, oh wow, I know what that is, I know what this is. Like, I think people like the reward, and if you want to look at how is something like this done correctly, um, is I would say defer to say something the way Xenoblade 3 did it, where so that gets set in a future timeline, right? No one is ever referred to in Xenoblade 3 by the name of their race or whatever, because they don't know. Why did they do it that way? They did it that way because what if someone started at 3? So
Hmm.
we start at 3, so we're not going to bog you down with terms and names and things that you're not going to know. We're going to give them, we're introduce them new terms and names, and we're going to have this story reason, like the characters have, like, this is getting nerdy, but it's like, like the character of Uni, she's a Hyentia. She's never referred to as a Hyentia in Xenoblade 3 at any point. Why? Because that's a whole description that would be hard to describe for someone starting at 3. We're just not gonna know that she's just that she's a race of people that have wings. That's it. And there is no more description for that, because we're not going to confuse you with that. Now people who played previous games be like, oh, they're from this race, but they're never referred to as such. And it's not ignoring what came before. It's just sort of like, if we're going to have these big time skips, we're just going to treat things that, like, characters don't refer to themselves as such, because they don't know, because we're just this far in the future, and there's probably new players coming in. Now, how do we tie it in? That's where the DLC comes in. And I think that's where it could be fun for Zelda, because Zelda Breath of the Wild
Hmm.
had DLC, but it wasn't major story DLC. And I think if you wanted to, like, save super narrative heavy lore bits that refer to past Zelda games directly, put it in the DLC. Put it in there, because that's like, okay, this is for the hardcore fans, because at the end of the day, you can look at the statistics or whatever. Not everyone who buys a video game buys the DLC. No video game has like 100% attach rate between game and its DLC add-on. So it's just the hardcore people who are buying that. So, like, put your narrative connective tissue in a Zelda game, put it all into a big meaty DLC campaign, and then treat the original entry kind of like it's its own thing. You don't need to rely too heavily on past experiences or past happenings, but put that in there for the fans in the DLC. Make the fandom really excited for what's eventually going to happen in the game. I think that's a good way to if you want to continue having a Zelda game that's going to have connective tissue between games and titles, do that.
Yeah, I could see that. It is definitely a risk though if you do like the DLC, because you said like not everyone buys it, and like, but it is there for people who care enough about it. They're probably going to be the ones who are going to purchase it, so they're the ones who would want to see that payoff anyway. But I think it's a bit of a balancing act. Also, you reminded me, like we talked about this, like not because it was DLC, because it was a spin-off, but like Age of Calamity, Hyrule Warriors, Age of Calamity. Like, actually, if you want like a Breath of the Wild game, like not style game, but like set in that universe, but it's like not actually part of that canon.
Man.
It like it's very story heavy, and it's like, oh, the champions, you're fighting with the champions in the past. It's like, wow, this is kind of nice. Like you get this character development, the story development. I was like, oh, well, this is what I wanted. Like, can you find a way to like take this and put this in the Breath of the Wild somehow? And like that would have been amazing.
Age of Calamity is such a wimp out of a story, though.
Oh, I mean, well, that's because of the stakes. But forget that part. Everything up to that point, because I get why they did what they did.
Advertised it as such. They literally
I know,
said it.
We already talked about
and it's
Nintendo,
not.
Zelda advertising, how they do this all the time. They say all these stakes important, and then they like pull the rug from under you, and it's like, okay, should have known better this time, Charlie Brown with the football. It's like, yeah, but I mean, like
they were promising us Torna, and we didn't get that. And instead, we got like we got Care Bears.
Well, because I think it would have. Yeah, it was like we thought it was gonna like because it would have had to go some dark places with like, oh, we're gonna have to like see the champions all die and stuff, and it's like, no, you're not, because this isn't actually the prequel. This isn't the direct prequel to Breath of the Wild. It's a prequel to a version of Breath of the Wild in like another timeline. It's like, oh, this is like multiverse shit. I was like, okay, I see what you're doing here.
Yeah.
But forget the stakes part of that. I understand that. But like up until that part where it's pulled away, what they were doing narratively in that game, like the structure, the storytelling, that's what I wanted to see like in Breath of the Wild with like character development, because there were these great characters, but like the modern ones, got some screen time, but like the past ones who were so essential to the narrative, you were just like getting them through flashbacks, and I wasn't like feeling connections with them. And I'm like, this is supposed to be like the big reveal, but like I don't feel any connection to these 4 champions. I'm like, the new ones I do, but like the old ones, like you're just like telling me this is important. You're telling me I should feel like these things are them, but like you didn't earn it, in my opinion. So like I feel like it failed in that regard. Whereas Age of Calamity, I felt for them a little bit more. It's like, oh, this is the missing ingredient I had there.
That was the thing. Is like I thought the point of Age of Calamity was to make you like to connect you with the champions, and like make you understand them and appreciate them, and like, oh, we're gonna learn about their characterization, and then they're gonna die tragically, and we're gonna feel sad. No, we're all gonna come together. Friendship is magic. Even the Yiga clan's gonna join up with us.
Yeah, that was.
I was like, oh my god,
I
really?
Get that. The other thing
like, I think, if anything, it's just the ending, like just how they decided to close the third act is like, oh my god, you guys are such wusses.
I knew that. I mean, I kind of figured they were not going to let this side game be like integral to like the. I mean, because to be fair, we were calling it like the Breath of the Wild trilogy at that point, because like we knew Breath of the Wild 2 is in development. We had Age of Calamity, so like I remember it kept referring to it as like the second installment of the Breath of the Wild trilogy, because we're getting this thing, and then like, oh, not so much. It is anything. But real quick, before I forget, when we're talking about like Link's voice, possibly have voice work and stuff. I know there are a lot of people who don't want that, but like the thing that's let me down, it's also awkward, is that I don't think we've ever had Link done well as a silent protagonist since Wind Waker, and because of like the expressions. Wind Waker is the last one where I felt Link had personality, had emotion, like real emotions, and believable. And I think in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, it doesn't come off that way. It doesn't work for me, and it's just how it is. So if they want to do a better job at giving Link personality through his like actions, visual emotions, body language, I need a little bit more of that. I need more of those moments. But maybe the truth is it's just too goofy to work that way, which is unless it's like a Wind Waker style Zelda.
No, I don't think so, because Twilight Princess, I can refer to. Remember when Colin gets kidnapped by King Bulbos?
Yeah.
And Link is chasing after him, and you see him get like really pissed.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, and you see him like get really happy when like he's healed, and like you see like there's moments where Link gets like really scowling angry in Twilight Princess. And Twilight Princess, I actually would argue, has very good emotional facial expressions for Link in that game, and which is why I think with Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, like, yeah, he definitely could have been more expressive. Even because Breath of the Wild is an in between of Twilight Princess and Wind Waker, and he had great facial expressions in both those games. He absolutely could have had, because Link is just sort of like,
he does show reactions. Like I won't deny it, but like I just didn't feel like he felt like a character in those games. Whereas in Wind Waker, what they were doing, Link feels like a character. He feels like he has personality at all times and like he has a presence there. And he doesn't feel like he's just an extension of me as like the player avatar. When Breath of the Wild, while they trying to make him a character, for a large part, I feel like this is still like an in between. This feels like they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, with player avatar and player defined character. And I'm not fully buying it. Like it feels too awkward and out of place for me in a lot of moments. And they need to either give them voice work or they need to rethink how they're doing it and try a different direction with like the silent protagonist, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, that one's actually a weird one because you have to really like start to wonder like if Link is a character, then we have to like start to give him like character development.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to like does Link does Link have growth? Are we gonna show Link going from point A to B, on a sort of growth chart or something, or like is he in a different place at the end of the game than he was at the beginning of the game? And honestly, these are things they've never done in Zelda, and I think it would be at least interesting to try. I don't think I don't think it would be like, oh, what a waste of time and resources. I'm like, well, they've that's the fun thing about Zelda, is that like you can be creative and you can do stuff like that. I think stuff like Link's Awakening and Majora's Mask, again the Koizumi era stuff, is more of like, okay, I actually would like to see more of this, because like Zelda's honestly the sort of like I would say more of the, again, right now it's kind of like they want Zelda to sort of be like, we have these creative ideas, and we kind of have like this big world event that goes on in the background that you have to like solve, as like that's like the big goal is the save Hyrule goal or save Zelda goal, and then we just kind of want to like indaunt you with these little fun little quirky gameplay moments. um but like going back to Majora's Mask though, like you don't really, there's never been a side quest that's kind of lived up to the Anju and Cafe quest line, the couples mask quest line, and in Majora's Mask. And the reason for that is because it was based on a real world event where the Zelda team, and when Kozumi talked about this, was there was a coworker that was getting married, and there was a big threat that North Korea might bomb Japan, and they were wondering if they should postpone their wedding because of the threats at the time. And they said, I don't care if we're only married for an hour, I want to get married to you, even if the sky is going to going to rain down hellfire on us, even if the moon is going to crash in. So you had this like emotional beat that you just don't get in Zelda games, and since then. So it's like I would actually like Zelda games to kind of like push harder back into things like that. Like I would like to have the emotional gut punch
Yeah, I,
of Link's Awakening's ending.
I,
I would like to have that more in a Zelda game. It doesn't even necessarily have to be timeline related or connected. I would just like to see them like push harder into these more like emotionally resonant moments, because and then when it feels like nowadays, even when they try to do an emotionally resonant moment, like, oh, Zelda was really sad, I'm like, because her dad was pushing her, and then like, oh, she failed. It's like their memories, like you said, it's like here's this thing we're told about, oh, things didn't work out in the
I
past, and
mean,
Zelda was
yeah.
very sad about it. And it's like, why am I like, I'm like, yeah, that's sad, I guess, but like, that's kind of why we're here. We're plumber Link here to fix the pipe, so it's like it's not like, because the Andrew Cafe questline, the point of that thing is not to like, oh, we're gonna save them so they can have a happy wedding. It's like, no, the point was that like they didn't care, like, or like he didn't realize that she didn't care, that they may only have an hour left to live. I still want to spend my last moments with you. Like having that emotional gut punch, in a Zelda game.
Yeah. I mean,
That's what I would
and I
like
get
to
it,
see more of.
man. Yeah, I would like to see, yeah, some more quests with like some more like bite like that to their narrative, because it is frustrating to me because both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom embrace kind of like the side quest system and the time, like the living world like on a clock, on a everyone's on a schedule thing that started with Majora's Mask. It's like they literally looked back to that and like kind of brought it forward. I mean, also like Monolith Soft's influence can be felt there because this is like what's from Xenoblade 1 has been doing, where hey, time of day, characters are moving to different spots, like you gotta like track them. So it's like kind of you see those influences there, and you have this world which can feel so alive at times, but it does. I struggle to like name side quest in either Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom that resonated with me as much as some of the ones in the earlier Zelda games because of those moments. Like I think almost everyone remembers those types of side quests, Andrew and Cafe, and it's like that one will always get, it's always gonna like stick with me. Or Pamela and her father in Iconic Canyon with like the whole thing about like the music, and like she plays it off as like a nightmare, like the father was having a nightmare or whatever. No, this is a nightmare, Papa, or whatever. Like you weren't, nothing was wrong with you or whatever. Like you had those stakes in those moments, and I didn't feel those much. And honestly, I should have known better, because thinking about it more deeply now, the side quests feel kind of like in the same vein as what they were in Skyward Sword. Like a lot of the side quests there were like the same exact style, and it's kind of like some trying to have like serious tones, but it's also kind of like cartoony in nature as well. So it's like trying to blend that a little bit, like just like the visual style of the game. It's trying to be a little bit of like both, but it's not like really committing. And while I love the aesthetics of Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, like it is, I actually like that a lot, and I'm like happy with that. I don't know if it necessarily works in terms of the narrative and character development, and I really would like to see them maybe have a more firm direction next time, where they're going to lean harder into a more concrete storytelling. Or maybe you need to go in the other direction, where it's like there's less direct storytelling and it's more from interacting with the world. Like when we think of some of the best ones, like FromSoft games or Shadow of the Colossus, or the games like that, where it's like we're not shoving it in your face at any moment. You have to pick up on what happened here.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good way of putting it. Actually, is that I think they should either go one way or go the other, because they've had two very successful, very well received Zelda games like this. But like you can't keep doing, much like you can't reuse this Hyrule map again for the next game. Like even Anuma said it, like we can't reuse this map again. I feel like you shouldn't try to like reuse other things, like such as narrative as well, where it's like the next one should either lean heavier or lean less into it. Like either be completely dejected, like Link is just a complete fish out of water in a strange man in a stranger land kind of like, or they go hard, like really hard into it, and like go really like go real hard on the emotional beats and whatever. But like this is two very successful, very large scale Zelda games in this style. And I think going forward, because again, like we're bringing up the timeline again because they brought it up themselves technically again. Going forward, I think, well, what do you do going forward? And I think I think you should definitely go harder in or back away really really far from it. So
yeah, sorry, I just saw a comment in chat from Mashi Meyer. The worst case scenario for the next one, they're just gonna cover Hyrule in water and reuse it again.
No, no.
An all underwater Zelda game. Oh no, we want to accept the challenge of making an all underwater game fun and enjoyable.
We really wanted to tackle swim mechanics. Like watch, like whatever, like the new version of Joy-Con will be. We really wanted to we wanted you to swim like in real time. So we're gonna have these motion controls so you can swim around like sunken Hyrule.
I will say, on a practical note, it would be awesome if they tried to actually fully realize what they were trying to do in the Wind Waker, like an actual sailing adventure where it is like an ocean, but like massive like lands that like are it's like seamless, and like you're not it like feels more impactful, and you can go underwater and explore too. Like that could be a fun setting. But I whatever it is, I do think it needs to be a new setting. Either Hyrule so far distant that you don't even recognize it. It's just Hyrule in name only, or we're going to somewhere else. If they're going to use the same characters, they want to keep that cast. But at that point, yes, go to a new place, obviously. But if you're going to keep the same Link and Zelda and some of the core cast, stop tippy-toeing around. Develop them. Like have them remember the shit. Yeah. You can combine both. I'll be fine and give you a pass saying Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom just sandwiched into one. Like they just refer to them as the past events, as like one big giant event or whatever. Ganon and all this stuff. Like that's it.
Yeah.
They won't delineate which is which, but like they happened. I'll be fine with that as long as you like have development going forward from those two games. But
Yeah.
gotta be a new setting.
Yeah, I think straight up you shouldn't, because even with Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, they still had, well, there's Lake Hylia, and then there's going to be the Gerudo Desert, there's going to be Death Mountain. There's like these like specific locations that have to be there in Hyrule because they're in every version of Hyrule. And I'm like, this is why you need to get away from Hyrule.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to know about a Death Mountain or a Zora's Domain. Or I don't want to know.
So,
I don't want to know what's in
Simmons,
any direction.
exactly. I think that sets expectation. When you say Hyrule, you are expecting certain things. So I think the safest thing would be to go to somewhere else so you don't risk irking some veterans. Because the other thing I was gonna kind of suggest was you call it Hyrule, but it doesn't look anything like Hyrule. Because that's the thing. I want to see environments that wow me, that look like that really embrace the fantasy trope. Like I want to see like things that don't that like you can't see in reality. And that's one of the best things. Like for example, like other games I play, I love seeing those environments where it's like obviously some things they go for it looks like something that could be realistic and could be in a world. Then you see like a forest full of like a bunch of like crystal trees and like purple leaves, and it's like whoa, like this is like stuff in like that direction, so fantastical that it's only from like your like a story, a storybook, a child's fantasy or fable. I want
Yeah.
that, and I want to see those types of crazy things in future Zelda games as well. Now they do have some of that in these games, but I'd like to see more of it and go crazy with it. Like I would really love to see that.
Yeah, I want no connection. I want nothing. Is this the Lost Woods? Is this Death Mountain? Is this? No, I don't want that. I don't want that at all. Because the thing is like even with all the how
Yeah.
big the world is and how much they've added to it, it's like you get to a foggy forest, and you if you go the wrong direction, you end up back at the start. I'm like, okay, that's been in every Zelda game since the
Yeah.
first one.
I think we don't need
Yeah.
that anymore.
Death Mountain, there's a volcano somewhere on the map, and then there's fire, and then like Ocarina, since Ocarina, there's been Gorons that live there, sure, and fish people live in the lake. Like, I don't want to know. Like with the next one, it's just like don't, because then I feel you also you're giving yourself a lease on lore where it's like you don't have to adhere to anything. You don't have to reference back or like have anything follow any formula. You can
Yeah.
create completely new lore for new area stuff, which I think
Yeah.
would be honestly a benefit to them going forward with their next
And
title.
in gameplay, it really like I mean they obviously are trying to do it within the confines of staying in the same area, but like if you just go somewhere else, it like you can design that world around whatever new cool gameplay like elements you want to come up with that are unique, that free up. And I think you see that like when we're talking about the what ifs, like that's the freedom that Koizumi gets to enjoy with Mario. You see those fantastical worlds they come up with for those Mario games and the power-ups and the gimmicks. Like that's like I was like, can we get some of that innovation infused into Zelda? Yes, we did fusion and we did create stuff and we have all these things in Zelda. And yes, that's very innovative, but I think it's not what I'm looking for, honestly. I never asked for it, and it didn't really appeal to me as much. I'm like, I'm not really too much into this. This basically, you're giving me like more of a sandbox. I get it. It's a sandbox Zelda game, and you're just giving me more ways to like cheese stuff and like break things. And like this feels like true, like old school open world. I want something a little bit more defined. I would like something that has me have to like solve certain things. I don't want to go to the fire temple again and bypass all this cool shit you laid for me because I found a way just to skip everything because of like the tools you have. Like you need to make those. You need to find a way to solve these issues. Like I talked about a lot of different problems there, but like to me, you need to figure out a way to infuse some of these more classical elements or just something that's new and innovative that represents like power ups or world design. And have that's the challenge you got to solve.
That's the other thing is I think we've seen with many other games, you can tie lore to your new gameplay, new ideas. Like having this creative, because the thing is it's like with Mario, like with Mario Odyssey, is like you go to a level that's all based on fondue and it's all like oddly angular shaped or whatever, and they have all these these weird little like chef, characters there, and it's like, okay, well, this is a whole new world with a whole new, race or whatever, that you find there, and then it's all tied into where they live or whatever, and that's something you would get by creatively moving away from expectations with Hyrule. It's like, well, we got to have bokoblins and moblins, and we need to have
Oh,
this,
we
and we
need
need to have
new
that, and
enemy
it's like,
designs
and
like
it's
yesterday.
like, yeah, exactly. So I'm like, you can, if you went, go somewhere else, have new creatures, have new races, and you can tie that directly into new story beats, especially since you're not tied to repeating the same thing over and over and over again. And you don't need, and the dumbest thing they could do, because they did it way too much and they started with the Sheikah, was like, there's a secret hidden tribe that was secretly, behind everything, and like everything important in Zelda's backstory, and like they've done this over and over and
Yeah,
over
saying
again.
not showing. Yeah.
Yeah, well, just the fact that, like, they were super important to the Hyrule royal family. The Sheikah were super important. The Zonai were super important. The Mogwai or whatever. whatever, whatever,
Okay.
whatever was in Skyward Sword, like they were also super important with the Sheikah as well, and it's just kind of like, stop trying to tie everything
Gizmo's
back
gonna show up the
into.
next one.
I like.
Don't
Like,
feed
we
him
just
after
saw-
midnight. That's the new mechanic. Don't eat food after midnight. Everyone turns into gremlins. No, what was I gonna say? And also one of the things I'm hoping for as well, like for this innovation, like obviously this next Zelda game will, whatever the future ones after Echoes of Wisdom will most likely be on new Switch hardware at the very least. And I'm sorry, minor early Astrobot spoiler, really quick. There's a level that like made me think of Minish Cap, because you could instantly go between being small and big with
Yeah.
and how the world like looked one way from being big, and when you shrunk down, all of a sudden, whoa! I was like, there's no going into a tree stump transition effect. Like, man,
Yeah,
imagine making a modern Minish Cap. I was like, yo, here you this is the stuff, like you could totally make these fantastic looking Zelda games, and then like you could so here's your gameplay hook. You could still be creative, and honestly, it doesn't. I don't necessarily believe, the point I'm trying to make also is that I don't necessarily believe that like you have to like sacrifice narrative storytelling for having but because you don't want to paint yourself in a corner with like gameplay mechanics. I would like to know. I'd love for them to share. Maybe I just forgotten one, or I just didn't read it somewhere. Them giving a tangible example in the past when they were developing a Zelda game where they were concerned previous story revelation will prevent them from doing something they really wanted gameplay or design wise. I'm like, what? What?
I can't believe that ever was a thing. I
Yeah.
don't believe that. I don't believe that ever would have ever been a thing. And again, they could just do what they always do, which is just be like, ignore it anyways. Like, that doesn't fit with the pre-established canon. I don't care. Skyward Sword exists. Like, just do it anyways. And again, a lot of these issues get solved when you just leave Hyrule.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I think we're
When you
making
leave
a
Hyrule,
point
and,
here.
like they don't even reference the Triforce in the last two Zelda games. So they've already kind of like forgotten that a Triforce even is a thing or exists. But like, we don't need to do the goddess Hylia or Ganondorf or the Hyrule royal family. We don't need to do any of that. None of that. We don't need any of that. We don't need any of that anymore. We can expand the Zelda world now. It doesn't have to be like everything that ever happened in this small country with a volcano and a desert and a lake.
Yeah.
In a forest. Like, I think there's opportunity for richer, grander, and more exciting and unknown lore bits if you just leave her and stop trying to connect everything to the royal family.
Exactly. And honestly, I know it wasn't canon, but this harkens back to like a childhood thing from me about like from the early days of being into Zelda. They used to have these older publications like obviously Nintendo Power, but like the Fun Club and other like little like magazine type things, where I remember reading one about like Link was kind of like treated as like this adventurer. He was just traveling from land to land, and he just came across Hyrule. It was like Impa just came across him and sensed he was a hero and asked him like, "Here's this plight of Hyrule," and I'm like, "Oh, well, he saved Hyrule. Move on." Like, like this to me, like kind of it taps into the spirit of like I feel like they were maybe getting at, or some people who were into Zelda who were like older and like having different takes on it were like, yeah, he's this traveling adventurer. And like even the
Yeah,
second
again,
second one's called Venture of Link or Link's Adventures, depending on,
yeah,
you know, the translation you go with the Japanese title. It's like, here you go. Like this should be it. I mean, it wasn't like what it was about.
literally the east plot
Yeah,
line.
what you're talking about, like this is what I feel like it could have been, and maybe could still be. And as we talked about for this past like hour and a half, that it opens up so much creative freedom if they do stuff, if they take this direction and decide to go this way. Now, I will like my like kind of final thought here is to obviously acknowledge the other side. There are people who absolutely love Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, don't really care so much about like the narrative connectivity, and
Right.
maybe have never cared about the narrative connectivity of a Zelda game, and love the characterizations of the characters in both those games. And honestly, this might not. I still feel like this might not necessarily take away from what you like about those games. I feel like Nintendo's not going to
Right.
stop innovating gameplay wise when it comes to new Zelda games. I think they are set for having open world style Zelda games for like the long term, and I think you're still going to get that it's still going to satisfy that. I think the only thing that could maybe be a negative for you is you eject to more story or more stakes, and maybe a setting that's not Hyrule if you're really just that attached to
Being
Hyrule. Yeah,
I can't imagine being like, I want to remix the same map again. Like I feel like people, because there's, to be frank, Mike, there's tens of millions of people who have only ever played Breath of the Wild and
yeah,
Tears of the Kingdom.
yeah,
Tens of millions of people, and I think even for them, I think even if your only connection to the franchise is these two games or just Breath of the Wild, I think having a new game that's like, okay, this is the style of Breath of the Wild, but we're going to put it completely new place, because you're going to get the same sense of discovery they had. So for us, when we would see like an Easter egg in Breath of the Wild, it's like, oh, cool, I know what that is.
yeah,
But for like some people, be like, hey, did you know this is the outline of Lon Lon Ranch from Ocarina of Time? And for people who never played Ocarina, like, cool, I guess, whatever. Um, but but like the fun thing you could do with putting it somewhere new for the next game is that we can all be discovering things for the first time together. Everyone can have that experience of like, I have no idea what's over here. I have no idea. This, like, do you know what this is? You're a Zelda guy. I don't know. We're in a
yeah.
new. This is a
That,
new land. This is a new story. I
yeah,
don't know. So, like to me, I'm like That's I think where, because Breath of the Wild use Breath of the Wild as the bridge, as the foundation, which is what I really wanted it to do for the next game, which was like, here's the foundation. We've created the best Zelda overworld ever. Um, Now let's bring back dungeons. Let's put more than 10 minutes of thought into the
yeah,
storytelling. Let's really like go for some really cool, great emotional, hard-hitting, side quests. And let's hire a music composer. But I know there's music in Breath of the Wild, but it all sounds
yeah. I got
but
that too. It's
like,
the Kingdom
e- e-
soundtrack, like whatever, 8, 9 disc. It's like,
I'm like,
yeah,
how?
they have it. I
So if you
mean,
bought it, Mike, how is there?
you just go look at the track listing and stuff. Like they do have all that music, and it's in there. Just
How?
I
What
think
is it?
it's
Just
not like
is it 10 variations of the same
that. I
jingle?
mean, sure. I mean, it definitely has music. I mean, sorry, I have like cat aggro real quick. Hey, cat, you want to be on the podcast and interrupt us by destroying my blinds? Anyway, the thing I want to say is, I know we've been talking a lot about like connectivity here, and I know there are people who are not into it. This is like what I would have wished had happened, but honestly, I don't think it's ever going to happen at this point. So I've like moved on from really caring too much about like the connection between the games and like the so-called timeline to wanting them to have, the gameplay innovations and like dungeons and stuff. Like I like that's my new hope, is like there's still classical and new items and power-ups. Like that's where my hopes now lie with going forward, and I still think there is an opportunity for that to happen. So like I've kind of like switched expectations from, yes, we spent this last 90 minutes about I wish it would have like the story could have done this, and it'd be great if they did this and this and this. And it's like at this point it's like I don't think any of that's happening, and it's
Yeah.
okay. And like these games have sold so much that's like the money like talks here, and it's like they're gonna keep doing these types of games. but I've not given up on other elements from the classic Zelda games, still making it back in there. I still have hopes that they can find a way to have themed dungeons where they have like puzzles you have to solve before you can advance. Like they added
Yeah.
better bosses. They could keep pushing that element as well, and they add even better, more bosses and better like enemy design. Like there's definitely things I think they can aspire to
I mean, I
elevate
think
the game again and satisfy veterans in a different way. So maybe we'll never get our like timeline or like the connection like we've been talking about, but there might be other ways we can get stuff
yeah.
that satisfy us.
Yeah, I give it up on the timeline anyways because I'm just like, look, it's not the same. They change
Oh,
staff.
yeah.
Different people come in and write it. You're just not gonna. It's just always gonna be vague and loose. There, I've just sort of lived with that and accept that. Like it's different people coming in and writing, and that's just that's how it is, and that's why it is that way. But I mean, for me, I'm like, I really want environmental dungeons back. I want you to get like dual claw shots halfway through the game, so you
Yeah.
can start doing crazy Spider-Man stuff. That's like that adds to the game, adds to movement, adds to exploration.
Or, like seriously, like did they not say many games have like things where you like grapple to something, launch off, and then can glide? It's like that's like a perfect gameplay loop there of like
Turn it
hook
into Just
shot.
Cause.
What?
Turn it into Just Cause.
There you go. Yeah, like just launch yourself up. And it's like woo, like more like there's a lot of cool ideas I think to do, and like traditional Zelda items. There's so many ones that I think people want to see like come back, or and instead of it to be traditional, just make up new things as well. Like there.
Yeah.
I feel like while we got obviously new powers in this one, they felt like kind of either combinations of old ones together, or just like slight evolutions of things we already had. Like we didn't get. I wasn't as blown away by the power choices we had in this one, and it was like, oh, here's Ultra Hand though. You can build anything, and oh, you can fuse everything, and I'm like, I get like maybe I'm not. That doesn't speak to me. I know people are thrilled with that, but to me, I'm like, oh, this is like one of the worst things you could have done. Like I'm so not into this. I'm like, just give me the item. Don't make me make the damn item and have to think of it. Like just give me it, and then I'll come up with ways with the thing you gave me. But I don't also have to think up how to create the thing as well. Like no, too much. Just like stop, dial it back.
Honestly, I think if anything, it's just sort of like the way you had to like sort of just manipulate objects in the environment to like stick them together. I wish there was if anything, I just wish there was a smoother way of implementing them, because like you're really playing Rubik's Cube with your controller sometimes to get the stuff just right. Like it works, it's functional, it does its job, but like part of me almost wishes there was almost like a workbench or something.
I mean, they gave you like
somewhere.
You could save things. I know you could save your things. They
The
also had like
blueprints, yeah.
they did have the blueprints and stuff like that were there. I wish that was like pushed on you. I hate it how you have to stumble across it. Otherwise, you might never have found it. It's like it was basically a Makiri counter moment for me, and like in Sekiro where I never found that, and I was giving up on the game, and everyone's like, "Yo, did you find the Makiri counter?" I'm like, "What? Oh, this is essential. The game probably should have made you get it." I'm like, "What?" I didn't get it. Got Makiri counter. Whole game changed for me. Sekiro was freaking amazing from that point on. I was like, oh my gosh, why? Like sometimes I was like, I don't know how they like you can like figure that out, but that was like the same thing for me.
Blueprints weren't essential in Tears, and I didn't have them for most of the game. And then I literally had to go to like a Sky Island and I cobbled together some platform with like 30 fans and use that to like get into like low orbit so I could get on top of Zelda and pull the sword out. But I had to do that just with like what was in the environment, just because I didn't have the blueprint available.
Yeah, I like honestly, like it's something that's there if you need it. I just wish they would have given it to you and be like, hey, if you do find yourself getting stuck, you can refer to these. Although we would like probably encourage you to maybe use them as a last resort. I mean, I don't know. This gets into a whole other discussion. We don't need to get about like difficulty and trusting player trust about like what like player expectations. But the bottom line for me is, while there were like fun moments with that, I still yearn for give me a hook shot. I mean, give me these classic Zelda items and let me use them in dungeons again, and let me solve these like more traditional style puzzles in these dungeons and have it be like uniquely themed. Like it needs to look unique, have unique music in there, and like I want to feel like the atmosphere. like they tried a little bit, but like I still don't think they quite. It was still not good enough for me what they did in Tears of the Kingdom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very impressive technically.
Mm.
Mechanically, one of the most impressive things I've ever seen, honestly. Getting that game to run the way it did on that potato of
Oh
a
yeah,
hardware. Very, very, very
can't
mechanically
deny that.
impressive. And like yeah, at the GDC they actually showed what Tears of the Kingdom would look like if it was made by Bethesda with that glitch video they showed. Um, but but yeah, like as far as that, but yeah, like the sense of discovery and whatever just wasn't there. Like unfortunately, like the lore and discovery of it was like I think it was even worse if you were a longtime Zelda fan because when you saw what was happening in the backstory, you're like, oh, we're doing this again. Okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
almost yeah.
yeah, Ganondorf's gonna betray you. Yeah,
If
no shit.
thinking more critically about it, part of me I think now wishes that like there was almost less to no narrative in Tears of the Kingdom. That like what they were doing with all the like the new gameplay innovations, like I almost wish if it would have went more pure sandbox where it's like you can discover these dungeons. There's really no context; they're just there, and like there's a final fight you can reach, and yeah, that's your thing. But like there's contextual clues, but that's really it because yeah, the narrative in that game did not satisfy me in one bit. And like honestly, at some point it was starting to like detract. I was like, I'm getting the same cutscene every time I finish a dungeon here. Like, come on, like
Yeah,
let's like this feels it
yeah,
feels like you're not even making the effort. Like, so then why even bother with this? And it's like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It was too similar. It
Hmm.
was like, oh, you gotta go, to the Gerudo. Okay, I know exactly where that is. I'm just gonna launch myself out of a cannon, head that way. I know there's gonna be some environmental puzzle, whatever. You know, it was with the Gibdo in this game, and it's like, yeah, there's gonna be some little twist, but it's like I know where everything is, I know where everyone is, I know where people, I know where to go, kind of thing. I'm like
Hmm.
that was the first time I had, well, technically the second time because Link Between Worlds, but it was like the second time in a Zelda game where it was just like, oh, rumor has it, or you gotta, we have to go get in contact with these people from this area of the world. I'm like, okay, well, I know where that is. And, I don't even need a GPS. Just gonna head to that corner of the map because that's where it is, and it was. So yeah, like the sense of exploration discovery was just kind of gone from Tears. So that's why why you gotta get out of Hyrule. You gotta
Hmm.
get out of there.
Yeah, I agree. They just got to do something new with the next one, and so yeah, we'll see what they do with Echoes of Wisdom. Like what they're, I mean, there's obviously bound to be some story in that, and we'll see what they're planning to do with it. And who knows when we'll hear about like the next 3D Zelda, what they're gonna do with that. But honestly, yeah, I don't know if you have any like final thoughts, or something we didn't touch upon. You want to talk about Simmons here because I think
Really, I think
we've said quite a bit about this.
yeah, I think my final thought is just kind of like again, I'm very and I'm still in the same place I was before, which is like I think Nintendo kind of just should get off the pot where it's like either write a series Bible and then just like have it there so people stop,
Sorry.
moaning about this stuff. Just write out a series Bible, stick to it, or just go to a different land entirely, um, kind of thing. Like just I think if anything, just stop doing the Hyrule royal family protects Hyrule from Ganon,
Yeah,
who rises every 100 years to cause chaos. I'm like we just
so boring.
we just need to get away from that because it's been like almost 40 years of this. We don't need to hear about the Hyrule royal family protecting the land or the Triforce or just the land in general from Ganon. We don't need to hear about this anymore. There's nothing left to say about this. You could have said something interesting, but that time is long past. Like just go somewhere else at this point. I don't need to hear any more about this. Like because like it's like they're not lore dense games by any means, but they are repetitive now.
Hmm.
And this is a sort of again, this is kind of a Miyamotoism where I'm just kind of like I don't really jive with the idea because like Zelda is a more narrative focused franchise than Mario, than even Star Fox, than many of the other Nintendo internal mainstays. So it has narrative. So it only looks to me it only starts to look a little more obvious the more, as we approach the 40th anniversary of Zelda, where I'm like, we're still basically telling the same story with slightly different beats or whatever, or different, oh well, this time it's the Zonai, this time it was the Sheikah, this time it was whatever. I'm like, for me, I'm kind of like, I guess it's fine if you start here because, like I said, millions of people started with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but it's going to be very difficult for Nintendo to ever beat Breath of the Wild sales.
Oh,
and it's still selling, and Tears is plateaued. Tears is not, and I said this when it came out, Tears will never sell as much as Breath of the Wild, and it hasn't.
Michael Huber, where are you, bud? Said 50 million for Tears of the Kingdom.
Did he? Man, bro, has he seen how hard it plateaued?
He still believes. You think Switch 2 versions of it's going to push it over push it to the milestone?
No. 30 million is such an incredible number of copies for any game to sell. It's so incredible. It's such an incredible amount of people who have played their first Zelda game. But you're never going to get to 40, 50 million. I don't want to say never. It could happen. Anything could happen. But at this point, I'm very much in the like, okay, well, now you've got 30 million people who've saved Zelda and Hyrule from Ganon.
Mm-hmm.
Let's all journey somewhere new together. Let's all do that, and then you can push the narrative harder, which I would like. You could go even lighter on narrative, which I won't mind as long as it's not about saving Hyrule from Ganon. You could go either way. You don't even need to worry about the timeline anymore. It could just be after Tears of the Kingdom, whatever. I think now is the time to. I don't want them to Mario, in which they haven't. I don't want them to Mario-ize Zelda, where it's like Bowser kidnaps Peach, Mario goes and saves her. The end. Like variations of that. So, and Koizumi's tried to push back against that too. Look up his interview with Polygon at the E3 2013 or whatever, 2012 or 2013, where he was talking about Mario 3D World. Like even Koizumi's pushed back against that narrative with the Mario games and stuff. So, I'm just at this point, I'm very much in lore. I'm like, get away from this 40-year-old plot line that could be summarized in one sentence. Let's go somewhere new, and then newcomers, old hats like us, everyone can be experiencing something fresh for the first time with the next game.
Well put. Very, very well put. Yeah, I agree. I'll say, I'm with you. Like I've long kind of like just given up on Zelda lore and Zelda timeline. Like that train departed a long time ago. I get my satisfaction for that type of like narrative lore connection, development from other places now. I play other games for that, to scratch that itch, and I don't seek it from Zelda anymore. And I loved Breath of the Wild. I love so much about Breath of the Wild and the opportunities. Like it really was a landmark title for the Zelda series, not just because of the sales, but like direction. And I'm very excited about what they could do with that formula. Tears of the Kingdom wasn't quite what I envisioned. It also has some good ideas in there, but I'm with you. Like I would like to see something new. I'd like to see them move away from Hyrule, and where my hopes and dreams kind of lie with the future, since it's not with Zelda lore timeline stuff anymore, is in that like not all of the old classical elements will be completely cast aside and maybe once again embraced in some fashion. More, as we said, more items and unique power-ups. Return of more classical styled Zelda dungeons. If I can get at least those two things reintegrated into the current Breath of the Wild style of Zelda and a new setting, I will take that as a huge win. And we can go from there, like more sweeping music at key, like, just like in each area, like that plays and isn't like, minimalist until a battle begins or something like that. Like those types of elements can, or like on the list there too. Like I think they are on your list as well.
Yeah.
But narratively, like the best I can hope for is like a good self-contained story at this point. Like if you like, give us or ask for narrative in Zelda again, like give me a good self-contained story. Like I want to feel like that story is happening in the moment, it's actively developing, and it's not reliant and like solve the problem of you have an open world game. How are players going to progress? How do we tell a meaningful story within those confines. And there are other developers and studios who make open world games who have solved that problem. There's no shame in just seeing what they do and maybe embracing that a little bit. If they want to
Yeah.
tell a more defined story a little bit and not rely on, oh, let's just make it 12 random like things, and depending on the order players do, they get them in this order. It's like, no, just solve it. Make it so we have a story I can care about again, and and it feels like the stakes are then and now, not happening 100 years ago and don't impact me anymore.
Yeah. Definitely have like a more try to make it a little more personal to like what's going on directly with the character and the immediate characters of the world around you, for sure.
Yeah,
Rather than just sort of like, yeah, I live in this cave. Can you go give me some apples? Sure,
yeah.
I'll go get you some apples.
Hey, and yeah, you have so many templates like you could like look to for where to go next in terms of environments, and I hope that really like it makes my jaw drop the next time I see that new 3D Zelda trailer whenever that happens. And also looking forward to it being on more powerful hardware. It'll be nice to see,
Oh yeah,
a little bit
we,
more, power under the hood for
I think we are all done with the potato.
yeah, they've squeezed every last drop of blood from that stone there.
Yeah.
It's like where it's dry. The well is dry. Time to move
Right?
on.
Yeah, there's nothing left. There's nothing left you could do on that hardware. Tears was like the end game for like what you can feasibly do on that hardware without it, absolutely imploding in your hands. So it's time. It may be past time, but that's a discussion for another time.
For sure. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for joining me, Simmons. And for our listener and viewers, can you let them know where they could follow you if they want to check out more of your stuff and anything you got in the works coming up, maybe?
Again, twitch.tv is assist me doom, which is in the just the link or literally in the title of this stream. Yo video games. If you go to YouTube and type in Yo video games, you can find all of my archived and original content there. And then if Maximilian Dude, if you want to see me portray a really comical version of Doctor Doom, you can find stuff there on Maximilian Dude's YouTube and his stream too. So yeah, those are the places to find me. And then if you want to follow me at Twitter, it's Doom Assist Me.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much, chat, for your participation and sharing some of your ideas. So thank you so much for that. And yeah, we'll be back again. I don't know if you saw, for our listeners who aren't watching this episode, Gabby, with some feedback from me, finally got us a logo for solo queue. So we have a logo now on the video version of this. So, and it'll be in the thumbnail
Nice.
as well. So been a while, but like finally have that. So shout outs to Gabby for making that happen. So thank you so much, Gabby. And yeah, we'll be back again on weekends as usual. Right now we're doing like every other week. Maybe we'll get back to a weekly thing, but for now, every other week. And yeah, as always, hit me up on social media if you have ideas for topics. But I generally have a good list of things I want to talk about, and I try and keep them a little bit more topical. So like this Zelda Timeline image came out. Let's talk about that. So there'll probably be something that happens in the next, probably this week. There's a lot of rumors about stuff happening in this week, so we might be right back this weekend. Watch out.
I'm in camp. Nintendo's not showing this thing until next year.
Oh yeah, I mean that's that. Yeah, there's Switch 2 rumors. There's PlayStation 5 Pro rumors this week. There's like State of Play rumors. It's like
I don't know how I feel. I think before the end of the year, Nintendo will give us a courtesy tweet, and then January they'll actually show the darn thing. But I'll eat crow on that. If Nintendo came out at the end of this month and was like, "Here's the whole new system and everything," oh, delicious crow, yum yum yum.
I hope we get to the very end of the year, Simmons, like the Game Awards, and Nintendo tweets out, Nintendo will have an announcement there. There'll be no news or discussion about the Switch successor at the Game Awards. Just to crush everybody. Like, not this year. Keely be like, no, why would you do that? I have no idea about this thing. But yeah, there might be some news this week that happens. We also got some more games. Obviously, I asked you about this weekend. Everyone just dropped. We got a new Zelda game coming later this month. I'll be checking that out as well. So we might be back to talk about that for sure. A lot of games coming out this month and some good games coming out in the next few months as well. So yeah, be sure to tune in to see what we're gonna be talking about. Otherwise, thanks everyone for tuning in. Hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend and have a good week if you're watching this in the VOD version. See ya.
Later, dudes.